Imagine this: your house gets robbed while you're out of town. Your family is traumatized, and somehow, you're the one who ends up in handcuffs. This is not a movie plot. It happened to rapper GloRilla. While bullets were flying and valuables were stolen, the police ignored the burglars and went digging for weed instead. Why? That's where this story takes a dark turn: racism, old laws, and a system that flips victims into suspects. Let's break down what really went down in Forsyth County. From there, a search warrant was requested and approved. Once inside the house, authorities claimed to have discovered a significant amount of marijuana stored in the master bedroom closet. Along with that, they allegedly found a controlled substance, though the specific drug was not named in the public reports. What makes this story even more complex is that GloRilla was not even home during the break-in or the search. She was out of town at the time, in Indianapolis, where she was performing during the WNBA All-Star Game. Despite her absence, police still decided to charge her. She later turned herself in voluntarily to the Forsyth County Jail and was eventually released after posting a bond of $22,260. Her legal team wasted no time defending her. According to her attorneys, Marissa Goldberg and Drew Findling of the Findling Law Firm, the entire situation highlights a problem with how law enforcement sets its priorities. They argued that rather than focusing on the violent crime that had just occurred, the burglary where intruders reportedly stole expensive jewelry and scared her family, the police instead made the discovery of a small amount of weed the headline. Her lawyers emphasized that GloRilla was a victim, not a suspect, and that the real issue, the break-in, was being pushed to the side. The people who broke into her home had not been caught or arrested, and yet she was the one facing charges. Her family, who was staying at the house while she was away, was left traumatized by the entire event. Shots were reportedly fired at the intruders by someone inside the house, but thankfully, no one was hurt. The suspects fled the scene, and police were not able to track them down. Now, here is where it gets more legally complicated. In Georgia, there is something called constructive possession, a law that allows police to charge a person for drugs found in their home, even if they were not physically present at the time. So, because the marijuana was reportedly found in GloRilla's personal room, and the home is in her name, they were able to charge her with felony possession. People online were quick to respond. Some believed someone else should have taken the blame, especially if other people were staying at the home during the time of the break-in, but others pointed out that when both drugs and firearms are involved, no one wants to claim ownership because of the serious prison time that can come with it, especially if it's a federal charge. Many fans and legal experts think that at most, GloRilla will face a fine, community service, or probation. They argue that based on her career, income, and lifestyle, it would be hard to prove she was involved in drug distribution, which would require more serious evidence, like baggies, scales, or large amounts of cash. None of those things were mentioned in the police report. Even so, the whole thing still sparked wider conversations about how race, celebrity, and law enforcement priorities come into play. Forsyth County, Georgia, already has a long and painful history when it comes to race relations. From the racial cleansing of 1912 to being known as a sundown town for much of the 20th century. The county's name often comes up in discussions about modern-day racism. People pointed out that this arrest only fueled the debate further. GloRilla's fans are standing by her, with many saying this entire case feels more like targeting than justice. And for now, her legal team is working to clear her name while police say the burglary investigation is still active. At the end of the day, GloRilla's story is not just about one person, it's about the bigger system, one where the victim can end up in handcuffs while the real criminals walk free. Whether this turns into a minor legal issue or a drawn-out courtroom fight, only time will tell. But one thing is for sure, people are paying attention, and the world is watching how this one plays out. She turned herself in and was later released on bond. Police are still working on the burglary case. They said GloRilla was charged after they found the drugs while responding to the home invasion. The 25-year-old rapper known as GloRilla, whose real name is Gloria Hallelujah Woods, walked into the Forsyth County Jail and turned herself in, on her own terms, on July 22. Her arrest was confirmed in an official statement, released by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, which added to the growing buzz surrounding the case. But her arrest was only one part of a much more complex situation, one that started with a terrifying break-in at her home just 2 days earlier. According to police, the burglary occurred early Sunday morning on July 20, around 1:30 a.m. It was reported that 3 individuals had broken into her home and were in the middle of stealing valuables when someone inside the house, believed to be a relative or friend, opened fire. The gunshots caused the intruders to flee the scene, and thankfully, no one was physically injured in the confrontation. But the emotional toll on those inside the house was still heavy. GloRilla herself was not home at the time. She had been in Indianapolis, performing during the WNBA All-Star Weekend, living out the life of a successful artist on the road. So when the news broke that her home had been targeted in a violent burglary, it was shocking not just for her fans, but for everyone close to her. What started as a crime against her quickly turned into something else entirely. Once police arrived at the scene to investigate the break-in, they claimed they smelled marijuana inside the house. That led them to pause the burglary case and instead shift their focus. Rather than putting all their effort into finding the suspects who broke in, they contacted the Lady Near Regional Drug Task Force, obtained a search warrant, and began a drug investigation right there on the spot. After searching the property, authorities said they found a large amount of marijuana in what appeared to be GloRilla's master bedroom closet, as well as an unidentified controlled substance, although she was not present at the scene and had not been home during the incident. The fact that the house was in her name and the drugs were found in her private room gave police the leverage they needed to issue an arrest warrant under constructive possession laws, which allow charges if the drugs are found in someone's space, even if they were not physically present. And just like that, the victim of a violent burglary was now facing felony drug charges. Despite how strange the situation appeared, GloRilla handled it with maturity. She did not hide or delay. She voluntarily turned herself in, allowing the legal process to move forward without delay. Her legal team, including attorneys Marissa Goldberg and Drew Findling, made it clear that they believed the charges were unjust and a sign of twisted priorities in law enforcement. According to her attorneys, the real tragedy was being ignored. Her home was violently invaded, and her family members were traumatized. Jewelry and valuables were stolen, and the emotional damage done by that night could not be measured. But instead of tracking down the thieves or offering support to those affected, the police shifted attention to a few grams of weed. That shift in focus, her lawyers said, shows how broken the system is, where a celebrity victim can turn into a suspect overnight. Adding more complexity to the situation is the historical backdrop of Forsyth County, Georgia, place with a long, painful history of racial tension and injustice. For many, the way this case has unfolded fits into a larger pattern of how Black celebrities and citizens are treated under pressure by legal systems that claim to serve justice but often show bias. $22,260 bond. The police say they are still working on the burglary case. Sheriff Ryan Freeman called GloRilla a victim of a serious crime and promised to keep searching for those responsible. But he also said the law must be followed all around, even in cases like this. Her team has not made any public statements yet. This arrest comes more than a year after another incident, when GloRilla was charged with a DUI in Suwanee, Georgia, back in April 2024. At that time, police said her eyes were red and watery when they pulled her over for making a U-turn at a red light. She admitted to drinking but did not say how much, only that she was okay to drive. People on social media are now asking why she even moved to Forsyth. Some say she should have stayed away, especially with past trouble in Gwinnett. The overall message: always know where you are moving, especially in the South. It truly does not matter how much wealth or fame someone has once certain officers decide to put you in their sights. There is no escaping their focus. Power and privilege offer little protection when bias walks in wearing a badge. One man from Fayetteville learned that truth firsthand. After facing an unjust situation, he simply nodded and said, 100%, confirming what many already believe deep down. Sometimes, the system does not care who you are, and what recently happened to GloRilla, that is just scratching the surface. It is only one drop in a storm that has been building for years, one moment in a much bigger cycle where people, especially Black artists or individuals from certain neighborhoods, are often caught in the crosshairs of targeted enforcement. Her story is important, yes, but it is also part of a larger, troubling trend that deserves more attention than a few headlines. You see, when authorities respond to a call that has nothing to do with drugs, but somehow end up arresting someone for possession, there is something off about that. It sparks questions. Was it truly about the call, or was the call just the excuse they needed to get a foot in the door? In GloRilla's case, the police were supposed to be there because of a burglary report. 3 suspects had broken in. Someone Inside the home, even fired a shot at the intruders. Nobody was hurt, thankfully, and the burglars ran off into the night. You would think that would be the main focus, catching those responsible for the attempted robbery, but somewhere along the way, the narrative changed. Instead of chasing down the criminals, officers turned their attention to what they found inside GloRilla's home. Marijuana and a controlled substance became the headline, not the armed break-in. And just like that, she became the one in handcuffs 7, though she was not even home when it all happened. Situations like this show just how easily someone's life can be flipped upside down, especially when public figures are involved. Fame puts a spotlight on you, but it also paints a target. For some people in power, it seems like any slip-up or questionable moment becomes a reason to swoop in. It is not about justice, it is about control, about proving a point. And the sad truth, GloRilla's experience is not unique. Many others have felt that same pressure, faced that same scrutiny, and been judged long before their day in court. Her case simply highlights how fast things can spiral, and how quickly the system can shift its gaze from victim to suspect without blinking. It is a reminder, being successful does not always mean you are safe. So I made a decision. I was going to dig deeper and really educate myself about the history of Forsyth County, Georgia. People have whispered about its past 4 years, calling it a place with a dark, racist legacy. But what I found, it was not just rumors or exaggerated stories, it was the harsh truth. Forsyth's history is filled with pain, starting with a horrific event that still casts a shadow today, the racial cleansing of 1912. That year, 2 separate accusations involving black men and white women ignited a wave of terror. Instead of allowing the legal system to take its course, white mobs took matters into their own hands. Fueled by rage and hatred, they descended on the black community with violence. Homes were destroyed, churches were burned to the ground, people were threatened, attacked, and brutally forced to flee. Over 1,000 black residents' families who had built lives there were driven out with no justice, no protection, and no chance to return. The impact of that violence was devastating. People lost everything: homes that had been in families for generations, land that had been earned through hard work, and the sense of safety they had once known. The legal system never truly stepped in to right those wrongs. No one was held accountable. No court offered justice. It was as if the lives uprooted and the pain inflicted simply did not matter. After that, Forsyth County stayed nearly all white for decades. For generations, it became a place where black families were simply not welcome. The scars of that past were buried beneath silence and denial, but they were always there, etched into the land and woven into the county's identity. Learning all of this made one thing painfully clear: the present cannot be understood without facing the past. And, in Forsyth's case, that past is not just uncomfortable, it is deeply unjust. A community was erased, and their story was almost forgotten. But now, more people are finally paying attention. The truth is being spoken aloud, and the hope is that by acknowledging it, change can finally begin. But that was not the only issue. Forsyth also became known as a sundown town, a place where black people were warned not to stay after dark. For most of the 1900s, the county had a reputation for being openly unfriendly and often dangerous for anyone who was not white. Then came 1987. Civil rights leader Hosea Williams tried to organize a unity march through Forsyth. It did not go smoothly. Protesters were met with members of the Ku Klux Klan and angry crowds throwing rocks and shouting racist slurs. The footage aired across the country, showing everyone how bad it still was. A second march was held, this time with over 20,000 people, and thousands of police officers and National Guard troops trying to keep the peace. That moment sealed Forsyth's image in the public eye as a place with a deep problem. For decades, the county stayed over 98% white, all because of that forced removal. And even into the 2000s, black residents and visitors said they were being racially profiled or treated unfairly. Yes, things have changed a bit over time, and the area is more diverse now. But those old wounds still shape how people see Forsyth County. Stories about racism in schools, housing, and policing keep the conversation alive. That is why when people say what happened to GloRilla was not just about weed, they mean it. And her lawyers agree. Attorneys Marissa Goldberg and Drew Findling spoke to TMZ Hip Hop and said her arrest shows just how backwards the system has become. GloRilla was out of town when her house got broken into. The robbers probably knew she was away. What they did not know was that her family was home. And her relatives were traumatized after the intruders barged in and stole expensive jewelry. Before running off, her family did the right thing and called the police. But instead of focusing on the violent break-in, the police got a search warrant after claiming they smelled marijuana. And once they found some in her private closet, they arrested her even though she had not been there for days. Meanwhile, not a single arrest has been made for the people who broke into her home. Her lawyers said it plain and simple: GloRilla is the victim here, not the criminal. But somehow, the system treated her like a suspect. That is where your taxes dollars are going. Wild, right? And when we looked deeper, we found something called constructive possession laws. That means, if drugs are found in a home, even if the person is not there, they can still be held responsible, especially if it is in their private room. That might be what is working against her now. Here is the tricky part. People are going to say, but she was not even home. And they are right. She was not. But the truth is, someone should have taken the blame. Somebody staying there should have stepped up and said, "That was mine. I didn't think anyone would find it." GloRilla probably expected that from someone in the house. And honestly, she would not have been wrong to expect that. And honestly, that could have been the end of it. If someone had just taken the blame, it probably would have ended with a fine for personal use. Nothing major, lest they had found things like Ziploc bags, scales, or anything that suggested drug distribution. Now, if there were scales involved, then it could have turned into a serious charge. But let's be real, if police had seen that, they would have charged her for distribution immediately. I doubt that stuff was there. She already has a DUI on record, so her fingerprints are in Georgia's system. People can be upset or argue all they want, but here's how I see it. They found weed in her room. Then they probably asked, "Whose room is this?" Someone likely slipped up and said, too much, maybe even mentioned her name. But here's why it's tricky. Some of y'all are going to say, "Nah, someone should have taken the fall." But let's be real, when guns and drugs are both involved, taking the blame can lead to serious time. We're talking 10 years, or more. So no, that is not something you just fall on the sword for. Look, GloRilla is going to be fine. She might get hit with a big fine, but based on her income, there is no way they will argue she was distributing anything. Her lawyers will step in, and at worst, she'll end up with probation or community service. She is not going to prison over this. I know some people do not want to hear that, but it is the truth. The issue is not whether she was there. It is that the house is in her name, and the weed was in her room. That alone might be enough for the charge. But again, unless they had hard proof it was for selling, it is not likely to go that far. I would bet they walked into that room, saw the amount, and just said, "Yep, that's hers." Now, about people saying this was some backdoor setup, I do not think so. A lot of folks love throwing that word around, but it does not fit here. If it was a setup, things would have gone a lot worse. If someone had died from that shooting during the break-in, say a neighbor got hit by a stray bullet, that death would be on the robbers, not the shooter inside. People love to talk about loyalty, but when things get serious, when guns and jail time are involved, loyalty can disappear fast. You only need one person to talk. That is all it takes. If someone paid somebody to set up their own crew, trust me, somebody's snitching, always. But anyway, that is just how it goes. Spread the word. Keep your people informed. And if you found any of this helpful or learned something new, hit that like button. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you stay updated. If not, that's cool too. Just do you, but either way, stay sharp and stay aware.